Good morning. I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee for Thursday, January 9th. Happy New Year, everybody. My name is Jeremy Schrader, and I'm the chair of this committee. With me at the dais are Council President Bender, Councilmember Reich, and Councilmember Goodman. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. We've got 10 items on today's agenda, including a public hearing, 2 quasi-judicial hearings, and 2 discussion items, but we'll first handle the consent agenda, which is in items number 4 through 8. Item number 4 is a parkland dedication ordinance to staff. Item number 5 is a rezoning application submitted by Kevin Adwok for 1701 44th Avenue North. Item number 6 is a rezoning application submitted by John Salterman for several addresses on Gilred Avenue North and Humboldt Avenue North. Number 7 is a rezoning application submitted by Beneficial Investments LLC for 910 Oliver Avenue North. And item 8 is a rezoning application submitted by Scott Hubbard for the property at 3528 Bloomberg Avenue. Is there any discussion items, or would anyone like to pull any of these off? Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a couple comments on behalf of Councilmember Ellison on item number 6. Would this be at the time?
Yes,
okay, item number 6 is a rezoning for a property in the Harrison neighborhood right adjacent to the Bryn Mawr neighborhood. Councilmember Ellison is sick and is not here today, and I'm glad he's not because I was scared of getting sick from him, so I'm glad he was able to stay home today. I want to note that there's been some concern with regard to this item as it pertains to gentrification in the neighborhood, but I want to point out that ArtSpace is building over 100 affordable units immediately across the street, and that Councilmember Ellison and I are working hard with staff on a partnership that hasn't really been announced yet with Habitat for Humanity for some home ownership opportunities in the neighborhood that would be affordable. I am really thrilled that our staff has been able to negotiate with the developer that some of the units in this building will be affordable, even though inclusionary zoning would not cover this project. I'm not thrilled about the demolition of any house, never have been. But understand that the 2040 plan is very clear about the need for density, and this was probably inevitable, like it will be in a number of locations. But the developer has agreed to help with moving expenses and rent subsidy for a 3-month period for tenants displaced. And Councilmember Ellison has made a personal commitment to help those residents stay north. So I think given what we're dealing with, where this rezoning is consistent with 2040, the developer has gone out of their way to do what Councilmember Ellison has asked them to do. I personally think this is a good compromise, and I appreciate all the work that he has done as well as our staff to make this happen.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or discussion items? Seeing none, I move the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. We'll next move on to item number 1, and it's the application submitted by the Hennepin County Facility Services for an interim use permit. That item was on our agenda last December and was continued to this meeting. Before I reopen the public hearing, I'll invite staff up for a brief presentation.
Good morning. Shanna, Sether, planner in CPED. The subject property is located at 2220 16th Avenue North. It is the Gordon Center. There are 2 structures on the property. One is the Willard Hayes School, which is vacant, and then the other is Gordon Center, which is also vacant. The applicant has applied for an interim use permit to allow for an emergency shelter serving up to 50 individuals who identified as female. The subject property is zoned R1A, single-family district, so the applicant applied for reasonable accommodation to increase the maximum occupancy from 6, which would be allowed in the R1A district, to 50. That was approved back in November. As the chair has noted, the application was continued from our meeting in December to today in order to allow for more public engagement on the proposed project. Staff extended the 60-day review period to March 13th. That's just an additional notation from the original staff report that would be included in your packets today. The existing Gordon Center was built in 1950 as a school and has been vacant since 2005. The surrounding area is predominantly residential with a religious institution nearby and then the school adjacent. The applicant is proposing to establish a new emergency shelter serving up to 50 women in the Gordon Center building. The duration of stay for an emergency shelter is 30 days or less. The proposed shelter would allow for access to housing, laundry, and bathroom facilities. In addition, there would be some case management and health care provided on site. The applicant is available for more details on the operations as well. Shelter residents would be assigned to the shelter through the Adult Shelter Connect service, which is operated by Simpson Housing. That service acts as an access and coordination for all shelter beds for reservations across the 6 sites and 5 nonprofit shelter providers. Emergency shelters are conditional use in the R1A district. The applicant, in order to allow for a more expedited approach and also to allow for the use to establish and be tested on site, has applied for an interim use permit. An interim use permit is allowed for conditional uses in a district, and the maximum duration is up to 5 years. The applicant is asking for the shelter to operate essentially as soon as they're approved through June 1st of 2024. If the interim use permit is approved, and we would come upon that expiration date in 2024, the applicant would be required to either convert to an allowed use or apply for a conditional use permit to continue the use on the property. A conditional use would then stay with the property for the duration. They wouldn't have to come back to reapply in the future. The staff report has been provided. Staff finds that all of the required findings have been met. The applicant has demonstrated or agreed to compliance for the specific development standards for an emergency shelter. Those are listed on page 4 of the staff report. There is no minimum off-street parking for an emergency shelter. There would be 28 spaces provided for either residents or staff for the shelter. There will also be there's also service parking available along the existing alley. The site is very well served by transit. There's a C-Line BRT stop 1.5 blocks to the east. So staff is recommending approval of the interim use permit with 2 stated conditions. First, that the interim use permit shall expire no later than June 1st of 2024, and that second, the emergency shelter shall be licensed per Chapter 236 emergency shelters, which is within our health code. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions.
Thank you very much.
Next, I will reopen the public hearing. Would anyone from the public like to speak on this item? Anyone be interested in speaking? With that, I am going to now close the public hearing, and I will move approval of item number 1. Well, actually, I'll start with discussion to see if there's any discussion among my colleagues. Is that you? Mm-hmm. Oh, Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just thank you for moving the item. I'm very much in support of this. I want to thank staff at both Hennepin County and at the city for working together to really bring this forward with some urgency as winter is here, and particularly with the tragic fire at the Drake Hotel, which has exacerbated the strain on our shelter system. Of course, that was a privately owned facility that provided very low cost housing to individuals renting private rooms, as well as overflow family shelter for our system. This is even more needed than it was before the break that we just had in our council committee schedule. So, and shelter, we have so many needs in our shelter system, one of which is female adults, single female people who identify as female. So I'm really happy to see this come forward with such a partnership between the school board, the county, the city. I think I received a lot of communication from Commissioner Conley on this, so I want to thank her as well for just her communication and leadership. So it's one step forward. I think we are seeing unprecedented coordination, both here just locally in Hennepin County, but across our region on bringing resources to potential sites for shelter. I'm very hopeful that, not just here in Hennepin County, but across the region, we'll start to see more and more shelters open for specific populations who have specific needs. So thank you again to everyone who helped bring this forward today.
Thank you. Not seeing any other discussion. I will call a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. Items number 2 and 3 are quasi-judicial hearings regarding the appeals of the Planning Commission's decision regarding a new mixed-use building located at 407 15th Avenue Southeast, 1412 and 1428 5th Street North Southeast, and 1413 and 1417 4th Street Southeast. The applicants have requested and agreed to a 2-cycle delay of council action on these appeals. So I will move to continue these hearings to our meeting scheduled for February 6th. And since the letters were sent out to neighboring property owners, I want to make sure that we have a chance for a public hearing. I will now open the hearing in case there's anybody here that would like to speak and is not able to come back on February 6th. Would anyone like to come up and speak? Anyone speaking on this item? All right, not seeing anyone. I will move to continue this hearing to February 6th. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. And with that, we'll now move the discussion agenda, and we have 2 discussion items, but I'll first move to postpone item number 10, which to our February 6th meeting, because item number 10 was the rezoning application related to the same properties mentioned in our quasi-judicial hearings. So it will be most appropriate to delay that to the same time. Is there any discussion on the motion to postpone item number 10 to February 6th? Seeing no discussion, I will call a vote. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Say nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. And finally, we've got one item remaining, item number 9, which is an ordinance related to the regulation of existing off-premises advertising signs and billboards near regional sports facilities. And we'll begin with the staff presentation.
Morning, Chair, committee members. Again, this item before you is a zoning code text amendment, amending regulations for off-premise signs and billboards. Councilmember Warsame introduced language to amend regulations related to off-premise sign advertising. The proposed amendment would expand the boundary of the downtown entertainment billboard district around the U.S. Bank Stadium. The current boundary is strictly around the stadium. The proposed amendment would expand that district 1 additional block. A previous amendment did go before Planning Commission and Z&P that had a much larger scope than this. In working with the neighborhood, they thought that was too much. They encouraged the council member to put forward something with a smaller scope, and that is here before you. The proposed ordinance would limit expansions and digital conversions to existing off-premise signs and billboards and require sign credits to be used. The amendment would also propose to remove language associated with regulating city financing of billboard advertising. This amendment was put in 2010. The elimination of this provision would streamline code and remove unnecessary regulation. The Planning Commission approved the removal of the language limiting regulating city financing of billboards, but did not approve the expanded district around the stadium. There are 2 versions in front of you. One, the original that staff brought forward with the expanded district, as well as the Planning Commission version that is strictly striking that language as far as the city financing of billboards is concerned. A little background on this: when the stadium was constructed, it was not subject to zoning code standards. That includes the structure as well as signage on site. There was some sentiment that the city should allow electronic conversions in this area, given the establishment of new digital signs in this area. It was seen as a possible equity issue. A byproduct of this amendment, in requiring that sign credits are used, would be that non-conforming billboards throughout the city may be removed, so an applicant could gain those sign credits to convert a standard billboard to a digital billboard. For those not familiar, a removal of a non-conforming billboard is the only way to earn sign credits, and those are earned if you're going from a regular billboard to a digital conversion. That would be a 2-to-1 ratio required, and that would be all that we're looking at here. So with that, I'm here for questions. Staff recommends approval of the ordinance along with the district expansion, as well as the removal of the language regulating the city financing of billboards.
Thank you. We've got a question from Councilmember Gordon.
So just to make sure that I understand it, so somebody would have to convert an existing sign to a digital sign within the district?
That's right.
So can you tell me how many potential existing signs that aren't already digital could be converted? Right now, is it just one sign we're talking about?
There's two signs.
Two signs.
So this is the block in question here. There's the restaurant. It has a billboard over the top of that, and there is a freestanding billboard near the parking lot. Google Street View, this would be right near the corner, right near the Viking ship in this location. So again, here's the restaurant with the billboard over the top and the other freestanding one. Those would be the only two billboards that would be able to be converted with this proposed language.
And when they're converted, they have to stay in the same position? It looks like they're both pointing towards the stadium, and
that's right.
They can't move them around. Okay.
There is a caveat in the language that says the existing billboards must face north. There is another billboard behind the one that's over the restaurant that faces south. Being that it doesn't face north, that one would not be eligible to be converted to digital.
Okay, thanks for the clarity.
Oh, not seeing any other questions. Thank you very much. Sorry, just getting used to the new microphones. Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With consultation of the Councilmember Warsame, who's been working on this, I will move the current submitted ordinance as described by staff, as described, and I think the benefit and trade-offs have been pretty well clarified by staff, but I think the key thing is to make sure that this is a circumscribed approach, that this isn't a door-opening approach, and maybe staff could speak to that aspect of what we're doing here in terms of regulating beyond what we're proposing today.
We did have some correspondence with Warsame's office. There was some additional language that was proposed that didn't make it into the packets. The third version limited size of the existing billboards that would be converted. It would require that the converted signage shall be in the same location and shall be the same size or smaller than the existing signage.
Is that is included in the most recent version?
That is not. The clerk does have that updated language.
You'd have to move it.
Oh.
Yeah, let's move that. Did you ask that question?
So is this the version you want to move?
Yes, that is the version.
Thanks.
Correct, that is the version that we seek today, or I move. And if you could elaborate on the containment aspect of what we're trying to accomplish here by this allowance.
Good morning, Chair Schrader, Councilmember Reich. Excuse me, we've looked at kind of signage around the stadium since the stadium was completed. We all know the stadium was built under a different set of regulatory regime that is different than the Chapter 544. So when the author had approached us about, seeing if there could be some kind of leveling the ground, if you will, for signs next to the stadium, we looked at what would address some of those inequities, but without expanding a district towards the DM&A and others. We looked at existing signs. We looked at possibly doing it through some kind of conditional use or variance. What we really came down to is that we wanted to make a small district with a limited number of existing signs. We had worked with the city attorney's office on crafting language when we did the subject matter introduction, making clear it was only for existing signs, so that therefore we weren't expanding. While geographically the district expanded, the universe of signs was not expanding. We have used this tool of allowing signs to be converted to digital, kind of embracing market forces to use that as a tool to get rid of more non-conforming signs in less desirable areas. This is an extension of that policy. Given the types of signs we see around the stadium, I think that it will kind of fits in that context, if you will. But again, the effort was made to kind of limit what signs would be changed over. So notwithstanding a geographic expansion, it's really talking about a few individual sites.
Thank you for that clarification. And I know the communities that do have these non-conforming signs do see an upside when they're eliminated. And I know that was a motivating factor for this ward, is my understanding.
Chairman Schrader, Councilmember Bragg, if I may, I'd just add one further point. The size piece came up at the Planning Commission. I believe the owner of the sign indicated they had no intentions about expanding the sign. I think the language you see is just more of like, okay, we trust you and we'll put that in the ordinance. So that was just the added piece so that there would never be a doubt, should the sign transfer to ownership, different, Clear Channel wasn't always called Clear Channel. And so this is an added protection that gives everybody a clear expectation about what that sign will look like moving forward.
Appreciate that detailed explanation. So I have moved the current version that has all those features described by staff.
Thank you. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is probably the third or fourth version of this I've seen over the years, and while I think it's a significant improvement over previous versions, and thank Councilmember Reich and the author for making those changes, I don't support this change. I appreciate the perspective of the folks that we've heard from in this letter from the Neighborhood Association about consistency, but I also think we hear so much from folks who just don't like the impact that signs have, especially as they become more sort of bright and digitalized. I've had a pretty consistent position on this each time, which remains unchanged. So I won't be supporting this ordinance revision today.
Thank you. I did have one question. I see some of the members of the audience, if you wouldn't indulge, kind of one of the big things for myself as well as others on planning commission is what are some of the conditions if this area was to be redeveloped. I mean, we're looking at the Google Street View right now in a prime piece of downtown across from the stadium. The worry that I have and others have is what happens when this is digitized. Are the billboards worth more than the land there? Are we stopping more development from happening? And if you wouldn't mind kind of coming and explaining some of the safeguards that are there, that would be appreciated. If you don't mind coming up, yeah.
Good morning, Chair, committee members. My name is Matthew Weiland. I'm with Clear Channel Outdoor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just to clarify some of your questions on the redevelopment and what's happening with the property, I'm happy to answer that. And we did submit a letter from our landlord to you specifically to address that. The language in what our landlord has indicated is they are open to redevelopment in the future. Right now, they do believe the highest and best use is a restaurant bar there, not only serving what's going on in the stadium, but also just serving the growing neighborhood itself, having a neighborhood service and food center. So they are actively working with another operator to get in there, and that's how it would operate now. They are not opposed to future redevelopment of the property. The agreements we have with them does allow for redevelopment. Certainly by our hope as part of any redevelopment, we'd like to be part of that. We think we can add a unique aspect of building, and our signs actually can become an economic tool for redevelopment. The income from that is a source of, helps source of financing for developers to redevelop. And we could incorporate uniquely into a building like we've done at Mayo Clinic Square and other places downtown. So we see our boards is the modernization of the boards at this location, helping the site and upgrading as it is, and also helping in the future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Goodman.
I would have probably not said anything, but I just had to ask you this question. The whole reason we're in this conundrum is because Clear Channel didn't want to move billboards and to allow for an affordable housing project to happen. We wouldn't even be discussing this, but for the billboards standing in the way of affordable housing. So please explain to me how increasing the value of a billboard and the stream of revenue that it provides helps economic development. I'm very interested in that analysis since Eric the Red that is there has announced he's moving. So clearly food and beverage isn't the number one thing. It's the stream of revenue from that frickin' billboard that we should never really be allowing, but we're being forced to as a result of Clear Channel and the property owners not allowing an affordable housing project to happen. So now it's all out there. So please explain to me how your economic value is so great for redevelopment, since you brought it up.
Sure. I'd like to back up a little bit on the history of the site then. I think what you're referring to with the affordable housing project, this whole project started about 4 years ago when we were approached by our property owner to meet with First Covenant Church and a real estate developer for the property. At that time, the property existed. Hubert's was there, the church, in a large parking lot. And we were asked to help with the revisioning and redevelopment of the block. And what that entailed was our property owner, landlord, they had to swap some property in order to make contingent parcels for where the affordable housing ultimately went. We also had a sign located there. And at the time, we were more than willing to partner in the redevelopment of the block and to move our existing sign where that building is. And that's when we originally approached Councilmember Masami with not only getting support, we needed a variance to move that sign to its current location, but we had a two-face sign there at one point that we converted to just a single face because of the apartments were going to be going behind it. So we worked together collectively as a block to redevelop the property. At the same time, the property owner was reinvesting in the property. They brought in Eric the Red. They upgraded Hubert's. They upgraded their parking lot. So it was a plan to update the whole area as the stadium had been built and as the whole area is being redeveloped. So we very much wanted to help and participate in that.
Well, if you were gracious in being helpful, then we don't have to do this. Then we can just say, okay, your billboard, you cooperated, the billboard didn't stand in the way of redevelopment, and now let's move on. But the reason we're all having to vote for something most of us don't like is because you basically were promised that you could have a digital billboard here as a condition for making some changes. So let's just be honest about that. If in fact you cannot say, yes, that was the agreement, I'm going to vote against it today. Go ahead and tell me that was not the agreement.
What I can tell you is that as part of moving our sign, as part of us agreeing to do all that, we certainly wanted to have the opportunity to upgrade and invest in our property. And that was certainly something that we raised, but we did not make that a condition of us moving. We moved the sign, the sign's already been moved, our sign is there, and we don't have this approval yet. At the time we raised it, at the same time we asked for it, and it obviously morphed into something larger at the time and ultimately got shot down.
So Clear Channel would be fine if we just didn't approve a digital billboard here and you would keep the billboards that you have because you don't view it as a previous agreement to allow redevelopment. Is that true? Yes or no?
We are not here under the pretense that we were promised something here, no.
Okay.
But it was certainly our understanding.
I just want you to admit that this is all happening because you guys felt you had a right to something. And we're just following up with that right versus, we're helpful in redevelopment. I've never seen a scenario where increasing the value of a one-story building by a stream of revenue from a digital billboard encourages redevelopment. I mean, I didn't get elected yesterday. I've seen this over a long period of time. So I think billboards are negative. Digital billboards are more negative, and we're only doing this to keep up our end of the bargain because you were cooperative in allowing us to build affordable housing. That is the truth. And we are people of our word, and we'll follow through. But, I mean, for you to suggest that you're helpful in redevelopment is just simply not true, and I would never have gotten up and said that if I were you.
In stating that, what I'm saying is we can become a finance tool for a developer. We're an income stream like any other tenant. The income we provide that developer allows them to finance that building. That's what I was stating with that statement. The other reason we're here is we do believe it's the right spot. We did work with the neighborhood groups. We did get their support to do this. We do think our signs bring vibrancy and energy to an entertainment area. And beyond that, we do provide, public service and public safety. So we are committed to doing those things as part of our business, but we do think we add vibrancy to this area and help with the development of the property. So
okay,
I do appreciate your consideration of this request and that we believe it's the right area and in the things we do with the city.
Great, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Not seeing anything else. Councilmember Reich's motion is before that. If the clerk could call the roll, please.
Councilmember Bender.
No.
Ellison is absent. Goodman.
No.
Gordon.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Chair Schrader.
No.
There are 2 yeas and 3 nays.
If the clerk could help me out, I'm assuming that means it does not pass.
Correct. That motion would fail, so another motion would be in order.
That's what I'm going to do.
Move forward. Councilmember Reich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will move forward without recommendation.
Councilmember Reich's motion is before this. All in favor of that, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. With that, seeing no further business before the committee, we are adjourned.